Sterile millionaire finds twins in a shelter begging for help. 3 words make him cry. Before we dive into the story, drop a comment below and tell us where you're watching from. Enjoy the story. The morning sun glinted off the Blake Financial Tower, casting a golden glow across Boston's skyline. Inside the penthouse office on the 65th floor, Harrison Blake stood motionless before floor-to-ceiling windows, surveying the city he had in many ways helped build. At 56, Harrison had achieved everything society deemed worthy of pursuit: unimaginable wealth, global influence, and a reputation for financial wizardry that bordered on the prophetic. Yet as he adjusted his immaculate tie, the reflection staring back revealed tired eyes that had seen too many lonely dawns. "Mr. Blake," came a gentle voice from the doorway. "Your 9:30 was canceled, and the Tokyo investors need an answer by noon." Harrison turned to face his executive assistant, Eleanor Pierce. 20 years by his side had given her an uncanny ability to read his moods. Today she noticed the slight downward turn of his mouth, the distant look in his steel-gray eyes. "Thank you, Eleanor," he replied, his voice carrying the refined edge of someone accustomed to being heard the first time. "Tell Tokyo we're in and reschedule the afternoon budget meeting. I need to review the European numbers before making any decisions." Eleanor nodded, making notes on her tablet. She hesitated, an unusual behavior that immediately caught Harrison's attention. "Something else?" he asked, raising an eyebrow. "The PR committee sent up the list of events for your approval," she said, swiping through her tablet. "There's a new addition, an orphanage fundraiser tomorrow evening, Brightwood Home for Children." Harrison's expression hardened almost imperceptibly. "I've already committed to 5 charity events this quarter. That's sufficient." "They're specifically requesting your presence, not just a donation," Eleanor persisted, unusual for her. "The board feels it would strengthen our community outreach image, especially after the pension fund controversy last month." Harrison turned back to the window, his reflection staring back at him. Impeccable charcoal suit, silver-streaked dark hair and eyes that had grown colder over the years. He recalled the headlines: "Blake Investments cuts retirement benefits while CEO bonus soars." "Fine," he conceded. 2 hours maximum." That evening, his private elevator carried him to the underground garage where his driver waited beside the black Bentley. The ride to his Beacon Hill penthouse was silent as always. Harrison reviewed contracts on his tablet, occasionally dictating notes for Eleanor to find in the morning. As the car pulled up to his building, Harrison was struck by the darkness of the windows. No lights welcomed him home. "Will you need me again tonight, sir?" asked the driver. "No, thank you, James." Inside, the penthouse was immaculate, silent, and empty. His footsteps echoed on marble floors as he moved through the soaring entryway. What he didn't know, couldn't possibly imagine, was that in just 24 hours, his carefully constructed world would be turned upside down by 3 children no one wanted. The limousine glided to a stop in front of Brightwood Home for Children, a weathered brick building with peeling paint and windows that had seen better days. Harrison straightened his custom tie, mentally starting his 2-hour countdown. "Remember," said Patricia Morgan, his PR director beside him, "just a few photos with the children, then your speech and the donation presentation." Harrison nodded curtly. "Let's get this over with." Inside, the orphanage director, Mrs. Winters, a woman with kind eyes and gray-streaked hair, greeted them effusively. "Mr. Blake, what an honor. The children are so excited to meet you." The main room had been decorated with handmade signs and colorful streamers. About 20 children of various ages sat cross-legged on the floor, their faces a mixture of curiosity and rehearsed politeness. Harrison delivered his speech mechanically, words about community responsibility and investing in our future, flowing easily from years of practice. Cameras flashed as he presented an oversized check, and he smiled his media smile, confident, generous, but never reaching his eyes. "Would you like a tour?" Mrs. Winters asked afterward. "I'm afraid Mr. Blake's schedule is quite tight," Patricia interjected. "Actually," Harrison said, surprising himself, "a short tour would be fine." As they moved through the building, Harrison noted the worn furniture, the outdated facilities, the makings of a place doing its best with insufficient resources. "And this," Mrs. Winters said, opening a door at the end of a hallway, "is our activity room." Inside, 3 identical boys with sandy brown hair were building an elaborate structure from colored blocks. They looked up simultaneously as Harrison entered, identical pairs of hazel eyes widening with recognition. Before Mrs. Winters could say anything, the boys abandoned their project and ran toward Harrison. "You came," exclaimed the first boy. "We knew you would," added the second. "Our daddy," declared the third, wrapping his small arms around Harrison's leg. A stunned silence fell over the room. Mrs. Winters looked mortified. "Tyler, Mason, Ethan, that's not appropriate." But Harrison barely heard her. Something about these boys, something in their eyes, their expressions, stirred an emotion he couldn't name. To everyone's shock, including his own, tears welled in his eyes. "I'm sorry, Mr. Blake," Mrs. Winters stammered. "The triplets have been with us for 6 months. They sometimes attach to visitors." Harrison knelt to the boy's level, his heart pounding inexplicably. "I'm Harrison. What are your names?" "I'm Tyler. I'm Mason. I'm Ethan." They spoke in perfect sequence, as if rehearsed. Harrison felt a connection so powerful, so inexplicable, it took his breath away. "Mrs. Winters," he said, his voice different than before, "I'd like to discuss adoption options." Patricia gasped audibly behind him. Harrison Blake, who had built his life on calculated decisions and emotional detachment, had just made the most impulsive choice of his existence, and somehow it felt like coming home. "You've completely lost your mind," declared Richard Harlow, pacing Harrison's office. As Blake Investments' legal counsel for 15 years, Richard had witnessed Harrison's calculated decisions, but never anything like this. "3 children, Harrison? 3? You've never even had a houseplant." Harrison remained calm, watching the Boston skyline. "The paperwork is filed. Home studies begin next week." Eleanor entered with a stack of documents. "The contractors arrive tomorrow to renovate the East Wing. I've scheduled interviews with 5 nannies and the school applications are being processed." Richard threw up his hands. "The board is in an uproar. Financial Times wants an interview about your sudden family man image. Your shareholders will enjoy the 23% profit increase this quarter," Harrison interrupted. "Now, if you'll excuse me, I have a family to prepare for." 2 weeks later, Harrison stood in the transformed East Wing of his penthouse. Sterile minimalism had given way to color and warmth. 3 bedrooms, each designed for boys with distinct personalities he was just beginning to understand. Tyler's in blues with a space for his building projects, Mason's with built-in bookshelves, and a junior science station, and Ethan's with an art corner and music-themed decor. "Mr. Blake," called Mrs. Chambers, the matronly housekeeper he'd hired. "They're here." Harrison's heart raced as he descended the staircase. Mrs. Winters stood in the foyer with the 3 identical boys, their belongings in matching blue backpacks, at their feet. Tyler, the natural leader, positioned himself slightly ahead of his brothers. Mason observed everything with analytical curiosity, while Ethan clutched a sketchbook tightly. "Welcome," Harrison said, suddenly aware of how intimidating his home must seem. "I hope you'll be comfortable here." "Why us?" Tyler asked directly, the same penetrating gaze Harrison had first encountered. Harrison had asked himself the same question countless times over the past weeks. "I don't have a rational answer," he admitted. "Sometimes the most important decisions aren't rational." The first days were awkward. Harrison, accustomed to commanding boardrooms, found himself floundering at breakfast tables and bedtime routines. The boys, conditioned to expect disappointment, approached their new reality with caution. On the 4th night, a thunderstorm rattled the penthouse windows. Harrison was reviewing contracts when Mrs. Chambers knocked urgently. "It's Ethan, sir. He's terrified of the storm." Harrison found the boy huddled under his blankets, trembling. "Ethan," he said softly, "would it help if I stayed until the storm passes?" After a moment's hesitation, Ethan nodded. Harrison sat on the edge of the bed, awkwardly at first, Then with growing confidence as he began telling stories about famous buildings he'd helped finance, tales of architects and dreamers creating something from nothing, Ethan eventually drifted to sleep. As Harrison stood to leave, he found Tyler and Mason watching from the doorway. "You didn't have to do that," Tyler said. "I wanted to," Harrison replied simply. Something shifted that night, a tentative trust forming in the space between what had been and what could be. The penthouse seemed to exhale, as if finally fulfilling its purpose after years of emptiness. The mahogany doors of the Boston Club swung open as Harrison entered, nodding to the doorman who had greeted him by name for 20 years. Every month, Boston's financial elite gathered here, men and women who controlled markets over brandy and cigars. Tonight, however, was different. Conversations paused as Harrison crossed the room, whispers following in his wake. Harrison heard, "You've become a regular, Father Flanagan," called Philip Westover, CEO of a rival investment firm. "What's next, a reality show?" Polite laughter rippled through the group gathered around him. "3 boys, Blake," said Thomas Blackwell, sliding a crystal tumbler of scotch toward Harrison. "My PR team would have advised against adopting even one. The market doesn't trust sentimentality." Harrison accepted the drink but didn't sip. "I wasn't aware I needed permission from the market for personal decisions, Thomas." Elizabeth Wellington, one of the few women in the room and head of a major foundation, approached. "Ignore them, Harrison. They're just shocked to discover one of their own might actually have a heart." The banter continued through dinner, oscillating between veiled concern and outright skepticism. Harrison maintained his composure, though internally, his patience waned. "Level with us, Blake," said Howard Pierce over dessert, leaning in conspiratorially. "Is this some elaborate tax strategy or a preemptive move against that Senate committee investigating corporate philanthropy?" Before Harrison could respond, his phone vibrated, a text from Mrs. Chambers. "Mason won't sleep until you're home for good night story. Your promise." Harrison stood abruptly. "Gentlemen, Elizabeth. Duty calls." "Parental duty?" mocked Pierce. "How domestic." "Indeed," Harrison replied coolly. "A concept as foreign to some as basic human decency." The silence that followed him to the door was more satisfying than any business deal. At home, Harrison found Mason waiting in the library, a book clutched to his chest. His face brightened when he spotted Harrison. "You came back?" Mason said. "Mrs. Chambers said you might be too busy." "I promised, didn't I?" Harrison replied, loosening his tie and settling beside the boy. From the doorway, Eleanor watched with undisguised curiosity. She'd served Harrison faithfully for years but had never seen this side of him. "The board meeting tomorrow," she said, when Mason had finally fallen asleep. "They're concerned about your new priorities." Harrison's jaw tightened. "Schedule it for 3 p.m. instead of 9 a.m. I promised Tyler I'd attend his science presentation." Eleanor's eyebrows rose, but she nodded. "There's something else. A letter came for you marked personal." She handed him an envelope. "The sender is Gregory Blake." Harrison froze, his heart stuttering. Gregory, his cousin, the fertility specialist who had delivered the devastating news of Harrison's sterility decades ago. With unsteady hands, Harrison opened the envelope. Inside was a short note. "We need to talk about your new situation. I'll be in town next week." No explanation, just his cousin suddenly reaching through the years with an ominous message. "Sir?" Eleanor prompted. "Is everything all right?" Harrison tucked the note away. "Fine, just family business." That night, unable to sleep, Harrison wandered the halls of his changing home. From Tyler's room came soft breathing, his nightlight, casting star patterns across the ceiling. In Mason's room, books lay open beside complex diagrams. Ethan's art supplies were neatly arranged, waiting for morning inspiration. These boys, mysterious, challenging, increasingly precious, had upended his orderly existence. And now Gregory's message, cryptic and vaguely threatening. Harrison paused at a window overlooking the moonlit city. For the first time in decades, Blake Investments didn't consume his every thought. Something more important had taken its place. Autumn painted Boston in brilliant hues as Harrison Blake attempted something entirely new, creating family routines. The penthouse's previously unused terrace now hosted 3 energetic boys discovering its potential. "Watch me, Harrison," called Ethan, balancing precariously on a decorative bench. The normally reserved boy had gradually emerged from his shell over the past month, particularly when outdoors. "Careful," Harrison replied, fighting the unfamiliar urge to rush forward and prevent a potential fall. From his perch beneath a potted maple, Mason looked up from his book. "He's fine. His center of gravity is perfectly aligned with the bench's surface area." Harrison nodded, accepting the assessment. He'd learned that Mason's understanding of physics often exceeded his own expectations. "Mr. Blake," called Tyler, appearing with a collection of fallen leaves. "Did you know that sugar maples develop the strongest red pigmentation when nights are cold but days remain warm?" "I didn't," Harrison admitted, genuinely interested. "I'm cataloging the species on the terrace," Tyler explained, his earnest expression reminiscent of a young professor. "It's for a biodiversity project." Harrison knelt to examine Tyler's collection, recognizing an opportunity for connection. "When I was about your age, I created a mineral classification system for rocks I found around our neighborhood." Tyler's eyes widened. "You like science too?" "I did," Harrison said, realizing how long it had been since he'd thought about that passion. "I still do, though financial systems eventually became my focus." Later that evening, after homework was reviewed and the boys tucked in, Harrison found a package delivered to his door, a DNA testing kit with a note from his cousin Gregory. "Curiosity about your new family prompted me to send this. Some mysteries are worth solving." Harrison placed the package in his desk drawer, unsettled by its implications. His phone chimed with a calendar alert. Tomorrow was his first parent-teacher conference at Whitfield Academy, the prestigious school where the boys had been enrolled. The following afternoon, Harrison sat uncomfortably in a child-sized chair across from Ms. Olivia Bennett, the boys' homeroom teacher. "The triplets are adjusting remarkably well," she said, reviewing her notes. "They're bright, engaged, and surprisingly well socialized considering their background." "They're resilient," Harrison replied, feeling an unexpected pride. Ms. Bennett smiled warmly. "May I speak frankly, Mr. Blake? When I heard that Boston's most notorious bachelor had adopted triplets, I expected challenges, but you're proving everyone wrong." After reviewing academic progress, Ms. Bennett hesitated. "There is one concern. The boys have been asking questions about their biological parents, normal at their age, but emotionally complex." Harrison nodded thoughtfully. "I've been preparing for this. I want to be honest with them, but I know so little about their origins." "Well," Ms. Bennett offered tentatively, "as someone with a background in genetics before teaching, I've noticed something interesting. The boys have several distinct mannerisms that remind me of someone familiar." "Who?" Harrison asked, curious. Ms. Bennett met his eyes directly. "You, Mr. Blake. It's quite remarkable, actually." Harrison froze, an impossible thought forming in his mind. Later that night, he removed the DNA test from his drawer, turning it over in his hands. Some mysteries indeed were worth solving. One afternoon, Harrison entered the penthouse to find Mrs. Chambers waiting with a concerned expression. "Mr. Blake," the school called. "Mason was involved in an incident today. He's in your study." Harrison found Mason sitting rigidly in an oversized leather chair, a bruise forming beneath his left eye. "What happened?" Harrison asked, kneeling to examine the injury. Mason stared at his shoes. "Nothing." "Mason," Harrison said gently, "I can't help if I don't know what's wrong." The boy's chin trembled slightly. "Jeremy Whitcomb said we're not a real family. He said you only adopted us for publicity and that you'll send us back when you get bored." "And?" Harrison prompted, sensing there was more. "I punched him," Mason admitted. "Then his big brother got involved." He gestured to his bruised eye. Something fierce and protective ignited in Harrison's chest. "I see. Are you mad at me?" Mason asked quietly. Harrison considered his answer carefully. Violence shouldn't be your first response, but I understand why you were upset. He lifted Mason's chin. Those things Jeremy said, they're not true. I know, Mason replied, surprising Harrison. That's why I got so angry. Harrison's heart swelled. I'm meeting with the principal tomorrow. You don't have to. I do. Harrison interrupted firmly. That's what fathers do. The next morning, Harrison sat across from Principal Conrad, a thin man with perpetually pursed lips. Jeremy Whitcomb and his father, Jonathan Whitcomb, hedge fund manager and Major Blake Investments client, sat nearby. Mr. Blake, the principal began, while we understand Mason was provoked, Whitfield has a zero-tolerance policy for physical altercations. Jonathan Whitcomb smirked. Boys will be boys, though some clearly lack proper guidance. Harrison's expression remained neutral, though his voice carried an edge. Before we continue, you should know that Whitcomb Associates' preferred investor status with Blake Investments is currently under review. The implication hung clearly. Whitcomb's expression hardened. Furthermore, Harrison continued, turning to Principal Conrad, if Whitfield Academy tolerates bullying based on family structure, perhaps we should reconsider the significant donation earmarked for your new science wing. Principal Conrad paled. Mr. Blake, I assure you we take all forms of bullying seriously. Jeremy will receive appropriate consequences and will implement a school-wide initiative addressing family diversity. On the drive home, Harrison received a call from Richard. The Whitcomb account, he's threatening to walk. Let him, Harrison replied without hesitation. That's a $30 million relationship, Harrison. And Mason is my son. The words came naturally now. Some things aren't negotiable, Richard. That evening, as Harrison helped the boys with homework, Eleanor arrived with an urgent envelope. From your cousin Gregory's office. Inside was a medical report. Harrison's fertility. Test from 25 years ago. Across the top in red ink. Falsified records. Harrison stared at the document, a cold realization forming. His cousin had lied to him. But why? As Harrison tucked the boys in that night, he studied their features with new awareness. Tyler's determined jaw, Mason's analytical eyes, Ethan's creative spirit, all reflections of himself that he'd somehow missed. A theory was forming, one so implausible yet increasingly possible that it took his breath away. Tomorrow, he would begin his own investigation. Saturday morning dawned clear and crisp as Harrison sat at the breakfast table, watching his 3 sons devour pancakes shaped like dinosaurs. A culinary experiment he'd attempted himself, with mixed results. These are anatomically incorrect, Mason observed, examining a misshapen stegosaurus before drowning it in maple syrup. The T-Rex is pretty good, though, Tyler offered charitably, always the diplomat. Ethan, mouthful, simply gave an enthusiastic thumbs up. Harrison smiled, noting how quickly these weekly pancake breakfasts had become sacred ritual. 1 month, with the boys, had transformed his rigid schedule into something wonderfully unpredictable. I thought we could try something new today, Harrison announced. The Science Museum has a special exhibit on space exploration. 3 pairs of identical eyes lit up simultaneously. As they explored the museum, Harrison was struck by each boy's distinct approach. Tyler methodically reading every display in order, Mason diving deep into technical explanations, and Ethan drawn to the artistic renderings of distant galaxies. Did you know, Mason said, tugging Harrison's sleeve before an enormous model of Jupiter, that 63 moons orbit Jupiter? It's like a mini solar system. I didn't, Harrison admitted, realizing how much knowledge resided in his 8-year-old son's mind. Later, as they ate lunch in the museum cafe, Harrison noticed a familiar face across the room. Olivia Bennett, the boys' teacher, dining alone with a stack of papers. Ms. Bennett, Ethan called, waving enthusiastically. She approached their table with a warm smile. What a lovely surprise. Enjoying the exhibits? Harrison's teaching us about space, Tyler explained proudly. And doing a mediocre job compared to your excellent instruction, Harrison added with unexpected humility. Olivia laughed. I doubt that. Mind if I join you? I could use a break from grading. The lunch stretched pleasantly as Harrison found himself genuinely enjoying Olivia's company. Her intelligence, her obvious devotion to teaching, the natural way she interacted with the boys. When Mason spilled his drink, Olivia reached for napkins simultaneously with Harrison, their hands briefly touching. An unfamiliar warmth spread through Harrison's chest. Would you like to see the planetarium show with us? Harrison heard himself asking as they finished lunch. Olivia's smile brightened. I'd love to. In the darkened planetarium, watching artificial stars swirl overhead, Harrison felt Ethan lean against his shoulder, Tyler and Mason whispering excitedly beside him. Olivia sat to his right, occasionally glancing his way when an interesting fact was shared. For the first time in decades, Harrison felt something he'd nearly forgotten: contentment. Returning home, Harrison found a package and letter waiting. The package held 3 identical sweatshirts with Team Blake emblazoned across the front. Eleanor's doing, no doubt. The letter, however, chilled him instantly. From Gregory again, requesting an urgent meeting. DNA doesn't lie, Harrison. We need to discuss your boy's parentage before this goes public. Harrison tucked the letter away, unwilling to let anything disrupt this perfect day, this glimpse of the family life he never knew he wanted, and now couldn't imagine living without. Tyler found Harrison in his home office late one evening, surrounded by old files and photographs. The boy lingered in the doorway, uncharacteristically hesitant. Can't sleep? Harrison asked, closing a folder containing medical records. Tyler shook his head. Can I ask you something important? Of course. Harrison cleared a space on the leather sofa. Tyler sat, his small frame tense with unspoken questions. At school, we're doing a family history project. Everyone has to make a family tree. Harrison felt a familiar tightness in his chest. These moments of navigating their unique situation still caught him off guard. Mason and Ethan don't care as much, Tyler continued. But I keep wondering about, where we came from, who our birth parents were. Harrison nodded thoughtfully. That's a natural question, Tyler. Ms. Bennett says we can adapt the project for adoptive families, but Tyler hesitated. Do you know anything about our biological parents? Harrison considered carefully how much to share. His suspicions about Gregory's deception were growing, but he lacked concrete proof. The information from Brightwood was limited, Harrison admitted. Your birth mother participated in an in vitro fertilization program. She passed away shortly after you were born. And our father? Tyler asked, his eyes so similar to Harrison's own, searching for answers. The records list an anonymous donor, Harrison said gently. But Tyler, family isn't just about biology. It's about who chooses to be there for you every day. Tyler considered this. But don't you ever wonder about your biological family? Where you came from? Harrison smiled sadly. My parents died when I was in college. I never knew my grandparents. For years I believed I was the end of the Blake family line. He reached out, gently squeezing Tyler's shoulder. Then I walked into Brightwood home and found you 3. Sometimes family finds you in the most unexpected ways. Tyler seemed to absorb this, his analytical mind working through the implications. The family tree project is due next Friday. How about this? Harrison suggested. We'll create a tree that shows both your adoption and what we know of your biological origins. And perhaps? Harrison hesitated, then decided to take the risk. We could do a DNA test together, the 4 of us. Not for the project, but for our own knowledge. Tyler's face brightened. Really, you'd do that? Of course, Harrison replied, already formulating a plan that might finally confirm his growing suspicions about Gregory's deception. As Tyler headed back to bed, visibly relieved, Harrison turned to his computer and typed a search query. Blake, fertility clinic scandal 1990s. The results would change everything. Olivia Bennett had become a frequent visitor to the Blake penthouse over the past weeks. What began as academic consultations about the boys' progress had evolved into dinners, museum trips, and today, a Sunday afternoon in the park watching the triplets play soccer with neighborhood children. "They're thriving, Harrison," Olivia observed, sitting beside him on a bench. "The transformation since September is remarkable." Harrison nodded, his eyes following Tyler's determined sprint down the field. "They've changed me more than I've changed them." Olivia smiled, then hesitated before speaking again. "I hope I'm not overstepping, but I've noticed something." "Curious." "What's that?" Harrison asked, though he suspected what was coming. "The resemblance between you and the boys. It's not just their mannerisms anymore, which could be explained by mimicry." She turned to face him directly. "It's in their bone structure, the set of their eyes, even the way they process information." Harrison remained silent, weighing his response. He'd come to trust Olivia's insight and discretion over these past weeks. "I've been a genetics enthusiast since college," she continued. "The similarities are statistically improbable for random genetic inheritance." "You think we're related," Harrison stated rather than asked. "I think it's worth exploring," Olivia replied carefully. "Have you ever considered DNA testing?" "I've done more than consider it," Harrison admitted. "The tests are being processed now, but there's something else you should know." He explained about Gregory, the falsified fertility tests, and his growing suspicions about a scheme that had spanned decades. "In college, I donated to a sperm bank, once for extra money. Gregory was already in medical school, specializing in fertility medicine. Years later, when I was engaged, we wanted to start a family quickly. Gregory offered to test my fertility. The results came back showing I was sterile." "Your fiancé left you because of it," Olivia surmised. Harrison nodded grimly. "Clarissa wanted children more than she wanted me. The engagement ended, and I threw myself into building Blake Investments." "And Gregory," Olivia prompted, "became the family's fertility specialist, eventually taking over the Blake Fertility Clinic from my uncle. He's been pushing to access my share of the family trust for years, money that's been earmarked for my heirs." Olivia's eyes widened with understanding. "If you were sterile, you'd never have heirs." "Exactly," Harrison confirmed. "But I now believe he falsified those tests. What I can't figure out is how 3 boys conceived with my donated sample ended up at Brightwood Home, directly in my path." "Too many coincidences," Olivia murmured, watching the triplets chase after the ball. "Indeed," Harrison agreed. "I'm meeting with a private investigator tomorrow." As the boys ran toward them, flushed and happy from their game, Olivia squeezed Harrison's hand briefly. "Whatever the truth is," she said softly, "those are your boys, biology or not." Harrison felt a surge of gratitude for this woman who had unexpectedly become so important to all of them. "Yes," he agreed, "they certainly are." Harrison paced the floor of his office, phone pressed to his ear, as Dr. Sanjay Kapoor delivered news that sent his world spinning. "The blood work shows several concerning markers, Mr. Blake. I'd like you to come in immediately for additional testing." "How serious is this?" Harrison asked, his voice steady despite the fear gripping his chest. "Let's not speculate until we have more information," Dr. Kapoor replied carefully. "But I'll clear my schedule for you this afternoon." Harrison hung up, staring at the family photo on his desk, himself and the boys at the Science Museum. Olivia had taken it just 3 weeks ago. He'd never imagined having a family photo, let alone treasuring one. Eleanor appeared in the doorway. "The board is assembled in the conference room." "Cancel it," Harrison said, surprising himself with how easily the once unthinkable decision comes on. Family emergency. 4 hours later, Harrison sat in Dr. Kapoor's office, the clinical white walls suddenly feeling too close, too confined. "The diagnosis is confirmed," Dr. Kapoor said gently. "Chronic myeloid leukemia. It's advanced, but there are treatment options." Harrison listened with detached focus as the doctor outlined chemotherapy protocols and survival statistics. His mind, trained to analyze data dispassionately, cataloged the information while his heart raced with thoughts of 3 little boys who had already lost one parent. The most effective treatment would be a bone marrow transplant, Dr. Kapoor continued. Do you have any siblings, Mr. Blake? No, Harrison replied, the irony of the situation not lost on him. After years believing himself to be without biological children, he now had 3, whose genetic connection to him might literally save his life. Any biological children? The doctor asked, unaware of the complexity behind the question. Possibly, Harrison answered. It's complicated. Later that evening, Harrison sat the boys down in their favorite spot, the window nook overlooking the Boston skyline that had become their storytime location. I have something important to tell you, he began, choosing his words carefully. I'm not feeling well, and the doctors are going to help me get better. 3 pairs of identical eyes focused intently on him. Are you going to die? Ethan asked bluntly, his artistic sensitivity making him the most emotionally perceptive. Harrison's throat tightened. The doctors are very good at treating this illness, but I'll need to stay in the hospital sometimes, and I might look different when medication makes my hair fall out. Like in those cancer commercials? Mason asked, his scientific mind already processing the implications. Harrison nodded. Yes, I have a type of cancer called leukemia. Tyler, ever the protector, moved closer to Harrison. What can we do to help? Just be yourselves, Harrison said, his voice thick with emotion. That helps more than you know. Can we visit you in the hospital? Ethan asked. Absolutely, Harrison assured them. And Mrs. Chambers and Eleanor will be here when I can't be. What? About Ms. Bennett? Mason inquired. Harrison smiled despite himself. I'm sure she'll help too. He didn't mention the DNA tests or the potential for one of them to be a donor match. Those conversations would come later, after he spoke with Olivia and his medical team. As the boys processed this news in their own ways, Tyler asking practical questions about treatment schedules, Mason researching leukemia on his tablet, and Ethan silently sketching what appeared to be a hospital room filled with colorful decorations, Harrison felt an unexpected calm. 6 months ago, he would have faced this diagnosis alone, with only his wealth and influence as comfort. Now, surrounded by 3 remarkable boys and the growing support network they'd built together, he faced his mortality with something new: hope. Later that night, after the boys were asleep, Harrison made a difficult call. Gregory, he said, when his cousin answered. We need to talk. I know about the falsified tests, and I suspect you know exactly why the boys showed up at Brightwood. I'm coming to your office tomorrow, and I expect the truth. The silence on the other end spoke volumes. The waiting room of Blake Fertility Clinic exuded wealth and exclusivity. Leather chairs, abstract art, and the understated elegance that had become Gregory Blake's trademark. Harrison sat rigidly, ignoring the curious glances from staff who recognized the infamous cousin of their boss. Private investigator Michael Donovan sat beside him, a manila folder in his weathered hands. Everything's here, Donovan murmured. Financial records, falsified medical reports, and the adoption trail. Your cousin's been busy. Harrison nodded grimly. And the boy's origins? Confirmed. Your DNA sample from college was used in 2015 at this very clinic. The birth mother was a graduate student who participated in their egg donation program. Your cousin tracked the triplets through the system after her death during childbirth. The clinic door opened and Gregory Blake emerged, tall, impeccably dressed, with the same Blake jawline but none of Harrison's warmth. Harrison, Gregory's voice carried forced casualness. What an unexpected surprise. Come to discuss your treatment options? My treatment team at Mass General is excellent, Harrison replied coolly. I'm here about Tyler, Mason, and Ethan. Gregory's smile faltered slightly. Your adopted sons? Charming boys. My biological sons, Harrison corrected, watching Gregory's reaction carefully. Gregory laughed unconvincingly. Impossible. You're sterile, Harrison. I diagnosed you myself. Yes, you did, Harrison agreed, opening Donovan's folder. with falsified test results. He placed the documents on the reception desk. Laboratory records showing Harrison's original fertility tests had been normal. Financial transfers from Gregory to a lab technician who was later fired for ethical violations. Records of Harrison's sperm donation while in college marked with a red flag in Gregory's handwriting. Why? Harrison asked simply. Gregory's facade cracked. The Blake family trust. You know the terms. Only your legitimate heirs could access your portion. If you remained childless, it would revert to me upon your death. So you convinced me I was sterile, knowing Clarissa would leave. Gregory shrugged, dropping all pretense. She was shallow, I did you a favor. And the boys? Harrison pressed, his voice dangerously quiet. An unfortunate complication. During routine database maintenance, I discovered your college donation had resulted in a successful pregnancy, triplets no less. When their mother died, I made sure they were placed far from Boston. How was I to know you'd develop a conscience and start visiting orphanages? Harrison's hands clenched. You knew I had sons and you hid them from me. For money. $80 million isn't just money, Harrison, Gregory replied coldly. Besides, what would you have done with children? The ruthless Harrison Blake, raising 3 boys? I guess we'll never know what might have been, Harrison said, his voice thick with emotion. But we know what is. They're my sons, biologically and in every way that matters. And ironically, they may save my life. Gregory paled. Your diagnosis? Leukemia, Harrison confirmed. Advanced. A bone marrow transplant from a close genetic match is my best hope. Before Gregory could respond, Olivia appeared in the doorway, the triplets close behind her. Harrison, she called, concerned. The hospital called. Your additional test came back. We need to go now. Gregory stared at the 3 identical boys, his expression unreadable. Harrison turned to leave, then paused. The authorities will be contacting you about the falsified medical records. And Gregory? Stay away from my family. At Massachusetts General Hospital, Dr. Kapoor reviewed the latest results with Harrison, Olivia, and the boys. The genetic markers confirm a parent-child relationship between you and the triplets, he explained gently. All 3 boys are potential donors, though Mason shows the strongest compatibility. Mason, ever the scientist, asked questions about the procedure while Tyler silently held Harrison's hand. Ethan, after listening intently, pulled out his sketchbook and began drawing what appeared to be Harrison and Mason in hospital gowns surrounded by smiling medical staff. Will it hurt? Mason asked finally, his analytical facade slipping to reveal the 8-year-old beneath. There will be some discomfort, Dr. Kapoor answered honestly, but you'll be asleep during the actual procedure. Mason nodded solemnly, then looked at Harrison. I want to do it. To help. Dad. It was the first time any of the boys had called him Dad. Harrison felt tears well in his eyes as Tyler and Ethan quickly echoed the sentiment. We all want to help, Dad, Tyler affirmed. I could decorate your hospital room, Ethan offered. Harrison pulled his sons close, marveling at the twist of fate that had brought him these extraordinary boys, children he never knew he had, who now offered him a second chance at life in more ways than one. Olivia placed her hand on Harrison's shoulder, her presence a steady comfort. You're not alone in this, she reminded him softly. Not anymore. The hospital room was quiet except for the steady beep of monitors and the occasional rustle as Ethan adjusted his drawing supplies. 3 weeks had passed since Mason's bone marrow donation, a procedure the young boy had faced with remarkable courage. Harrison sat propped up in his hospital bed, weaker than he'd ever been, but with encouraging test results showing the transplanted cells beginning to take hold. The boys had established a rotation, refusing to leave him alone for long despite his assurances that they should maintain their normal routines. Is this right? Ethan asked, holding up his latest creation, a detailed portrait of what he imagined their family would look like when Harrison recovered, showing them at a beach house, Harrison's hair grown back, all of them smiling. It's perfect, Harrison replied, genuinely moved by the boy's optimism. Tyler entered. carrying a stack of get-well cards from Harrison's employees. Eleanor helped me organize them by department, he explained proudly. Harrison smiled. Tyler's natural leadership abilities had emerged strongly during this crisis, the boy instinctively taking charge of keeping their family functioning. A sharp knock interrupted the moment, and Richard Harlow appeared, looking uncharacteristically somber. "We need to talk," Richard said quietly. "Privately." Harrison glanced at his sons. "Tyler, could you take your brothers to the cafeteria for ice cream? Use my card." Once the boys had left, Richard placed a thick folder on Harrison's bed. "The investigation into Gregory's activities uncovered something you need to see. It goes deeper than we thought." Harrison flipped through the documents, his face darkening with each page. Financial trails showed Gregory had not only falsified Harrison's fertility tests but had systematically tracked Harrison's donated genetic material through the fertility clinic's database. Most disturbing was a document showing Gregory had arranged for the triplets' birth mother to receive substandard prenatal care through a colleague, potentially contributing to her death during childbirth. He wanted to eliminate any connection. Harrison whispered, horror washing over him. "There's more," Richard continued grimly. He actively monitored the boys in foster care, using his connections to ensure they weren't adopted. When they were transferred to Brightwood, he must have panicked. It was too close to your territory. But he couldn't interfere without revealing his involvement, Harrison finished, understanding dawning. "So he sent me that threatening letter after I adopted them, hoping I'd send them back?" "Exactly," Richard confirmed. "Gregory is facing criminal charges, medical fraud, conspiracy, possibly negligent homicide regarding the birth mother. The board of the fertility clinic has already removed him." Harrison closed his eyes, overwhelmed by the scope of Gregory's deception. "What do I tell the boys?" he asked finally. "The truth," came Olivia's voice from the doorway. She entered carrying a small potted plant, a daily ritual since his hospitalization. As much as they can understand at their age. After Richard departed, Olivia took his place in the chair beside Harrison's bed, her presence calming his troubled thoughts. "They're resilient, Harrison. They've already faced abandonment and uncertainty. What they need now is honesty and stability." When the boys returned, ice cream evidence on their faces, Harrison motioned them closer. "I have something important to tell you," he began carefully. "It's about our family, how we came to find each other." With simple, age-appropriate words, Harrison explained that his cousin had kept a secret from him for many years, that Harrison could have children, and in fact, had unknowingly become their biological father through the sperm bank donation. "So you really are our dad?" Mason asked, his scientific mind focusing on the biological reality. "Like, really, really?" "Yes," Harrison confirmed, "both biologically and in every other way that matters." "Is that why we recognized you that day?" Ethan wondered. "I remember feeling like I knew you somehow." Harrison's throat tightened. "Perhaps. Some connections go beyond what we can explain." Tyler, ever practical, asked the most difficult question. "What happens to cousin Gregory now?" "He made some very bad choices," Harrison answered honestly. "He'll have to face the consequences of those choices through the legal system." The boys processed this information in their characteristic ways. Tyler with protective concern, Mason with analytical questions, Ethan through quiet contemplation. Finally, Mason broke the silence. "Does this mean the bone marrow transplant will work better? Because we're really related?" Dr. Kapoor, entering for his evening rounds, overheard the question. "Actually, yes. The genetic similarity is likely why your father is showing such promising early results. You three might have saved his life, and we did?" Ethan's eyes widened. Harrison reached for his son's hands. "You did, in more ways than you'll ever know." Autumn gave way to winter, painting Boston in shades of white and gray as Harrison's recovery progressed. The Blake penthouse had transformed, once again, this time into a healing space where family bonds strengthened through adversity. 3 months after the transplant, Harrison stood on the terrace wrapped in a heavy coat, watching snowflakes dance across the city skyline. His strength returned a little more each day, though the journey had been grueling. "Should you be outside?" Olivia asked, joining him with 2 steaming mugs of hot chocolate. Harrison accepted one gratefully. "Dr. Kapoor cleared me for short outings as long as I stay bundled up. My immune system is rebuilding nicely." "Mason's cells," Olivia said with a smile. "They're as determined as he is." Inside, the sound of laughter echoed through rooms once cold with silence. The boys were engaged in their now traditional Saturday morning activities. Mason conducting experiments at his miniature lab table, Tyler organizing their weekend schedule on a color-coded chart, and Ethan covering every available surface with art supplies. "They've been remarkably resilient through all this," Harrison observed. Olivia nodded. "Children often are, but don't underestimate how much your honesty helped them process everything. Gregory's deception, your illness, their biological connection to you." Harrison's jaw tightened at the mention of his cousin, now awaiting trial on multiple charges. The family scandal had made headlines briefly before being eclipsed by the heartwarming story of a billionaire saved by the sons he never knew he had. "The foundation paperwork is finalized," Harrison said, changing the subject. "The Rebecca Wilson Memorial Fund will provide support for single mothers using fertility services and children orphaned through birth complications." Naming the foundation after the triplets' birth mother had been the boys' idea. A way to honor the woman they would never know, but whose gift had made their family possible. "She would be proud," Olivia said softly, her hand finding Harrison's. These small touches had become comfortable between them, a relationship blossoming slowly alongside Harrison's recovery. The sliding door opened as Mason burst onto the terrace, tablet in hand. "Dad, my science project was accepted for the state competition." Harrison grinned. "That's wonderful, Mason. Your cellular regeneration model? Inspired by your treatment," Mason confirmed proudly. "With some improvements I suggested to Dr. Kapoor." Tyler and Ethan followed close behind, equally excited about their brother's achievement. Harrison marveled at how the triplets celebrated each other's successes without jealousy, a bond that transcended their identical appearances. "We should celebrate," Harrison declared. "What if we had dinner at the Harborview tonight?" The restaurant had become a special place for their family, the site of their first public outing after the adoption was finalized. "With Ms. Bennett too?" Ethan asked hopefully, his perceptive eyes darting between the adults. Harrison met Olivia's gaze. "Absolutely, if she's available." Olivia's smile was answer enough. Later that evening, as they settled around the restaurant, Charlie's Harrison at the head, boys on either side, Olivia beside him, the maitre d' approached with an envelope. "Mr. Blake, this was left for you yesterday. The gentleman said to deliver it this evening." Inside was a key and a note in Gregory's handwriting. "Family Cottage, Lake Winnipesaukee. Rightfully belongs to you and the boys now. I've signed over the deed. Some secrets are buried there that you deserve to know." Harrison stared at the key, memories flooding back of summers at the lake, before ambition and rivalry had poisoned his relationship with Gregory. "Bad news?" Olivia asked quietly. Harrison shook his head, tucking the note away. "Just another piece of the puzzle, something to address after the holidays." Christmas was approaching, the boys' first with Harrison, and the first in decades that Harrison had anticipated with genuine joy. Whatever secrets remained at the lake house could wait. This moment, surrounded by the family he never expected to have, was enough. "To new beginnings," Harrison proposed, raising his water glass in a toast. 4 glasses, 3 small, 2 held in still chubby hands, clinked against his. "And to Mason's cells," Ethan added, making them all laugh. As snow fell gently outside, the restaurant windows, Harrison Blake, once defined solely by his financial empire, realized he had finally found the investment that mattered most, one that paid dividends in laughter, growth, and love. The morning sun streamed through the wide windows of Blake Tower, illuminating the newly redesigned executive floor. Gone were the imposing dark woods and sterile minimalism that once defined Harrison Blake's domain. In their place stood an open, collaborative space where green plants thrived and photos of family adorned the walls. Harrison, now 60 and completely recovered, stood before the floor-to-ceiling windows, his reflection showing a man transformed. The coldness in his eyes had been replaced by warmth, his previously perfect appearance now comfortably relaxed. The cancer had taken his hair, but it had grown back salt and pepper, which he wore shorter than before, a physical manifestation of his internal changes. "Mr. Blake," came a familiar voice. Eleanor, still his trusted assistant, appeared in the doorway. "The boys are here." Harrison checked his watch. Precisely 3:30 p.m. School pickup time had become sacred in his schedule. Board meetings and international calls arranged around this non-negotiable commitment. In the reception area, 3 12-year-old boys waited, identical in appearance but distinctly individual in presentation. Tyler in a junior blazer, already emulating his father's business style. Mason with a science fair medal hanging from his backpack. Ethan carrying his ever-present portfolio of artwork. "How was school?" Harrison asked, embracing each boy in turn. "I got an A on my economic development paper," Tyler announced proudly. "My experiment on cellular mutation is advancing to nationals," Mason added. "I finished my mural design for the Children's Hospital," Ethan said, opening his portfolio to reveal a vibrant underwater scene. 4 years had seen each boy develop their natural talents into extraordinary abilities. Tyler had started a student investment club that already managed a small portfolio under Harrison's guidance. Mason's scientific aptitude had garnered attention from research institutions across the country. Ethan's artistic talent had blossomed into commissioned work for several community projects. "Ready for the foundation meeting?" Harrison asked as they headed toward the elevator. The Blake Family Foundation, established during Harrison's recovery, had become the centerpiece of his legacy, focused on medical research, adoption support, and ethical oversight in fertility medicine. The boys, despite their young age, participated actively in its direction. Olivia waited for them in the Foundation's conference room, her position as education director allowing her to bridge her teaching expertise with the Foundation's mission. The gold band on her left hand matched the one Harrison now wore, their marriage 2 years ago having formalized the family unit that had been growing since that first chance meeting at Brightwood home. "I've reviewed the scholarship applications," she said, kissing Harrison briefly and ruffling Ethan's hair. 27 candidates this year. The quarterly meeting proceeded with unusual formality for a family gathering, but Harrison believed in teaching the boys the responsibilities that came with privilege. Each presented their area of interest. Tyler on financial allocations, Mason on research grant applications, and Ethan on the art therapy program they'd recently launched. As the meeting concluded, Harrison's phone buzzed with a message from Richard. "Gregory's parole hearing scheduled for next month. Your statement needed." Harrison's expression must have betrayed his thoughts because Tyler immediately asked, "Everything okay, Dad?" "Just legal matters," Harrison replied, tucking the phone away. Gregory's betrayal had been fully exposed during the trial, resulting in a 4-year sentence that was now approaching its end. "About Cousin Gregory?" Mason asked perceptively. Harrison nodded, never hiding difficult truths from his sons. "His parole hearing is coming up." "Are you going to fight it?" Tyler asked, his protective instincts flaring. Harrison considered the question carefully. "No. He served his time according to the law. Besides, his actions, however wrong, ultimately brought us together. Sometimes the worst intentions yield the greatest gifts." Later that evening, as their extended family gathered for dinner in the penthouse, Eleanor and her husband, Richard and his wife, Mrs. Chambers, who refused to retire despite Harrison's generous offers, Harrison watched his sons interact with the makeshift family they had built together. "Hard to believe it's been 4 years," Olivia said softly, joining him in the kitchen. "Sometimes it feels like they've always been mine," Harrison replied. "And other times, I can't believe how fortunate I am that they found me." Through the doorway, they could see the boys engaged in animated conversation with their guests, the confidence of knowing they were loved evident in every gesture. "Ready for the next chapter?" Olivia asked, her hand resting briefly on her stomach where the newest member of the Blake family was just beginning to show. Harrison smiled, placing his hand over hers. More than ready. The Blake legacy, once measured in buildings and bank accounts, had been redefined by 3 boys who had changed everything. The sons he never knew he had, who had saved not just his life, but his soul. The Blake Foundation Center for Family Ethics stood proudly against the Boston skyline, its modern architecture incorporating elements of both innovation and tradition. 5 years to the day since Harrison's adoption of the triplets had been finalized, hundreds gathered in the auditorium for the building's grand opening. Harrison Blake stood backstage reviewing his speech one final time. At 61, he carried himself with the confidence of a man who had faced death and emerged stronger, whose priorities had been reforged in the crucible of truth and love. "Nervous?" asked Olivia, adjusting his tie. Their 2-year-old daughter, Rebecca, squirmed in her arms, eager to join her older brothers. "Not about the speech," Harrison admitted. "About seeing him again." Gregory Blake had been released from prison 6 months earlier. The invitation to today's ceremony had been Harrison's idea, a gesture toward healing that had surprised everyone, including Harrison himself. "You don't have to forgive him," Olivia reminded gently. "Just acknowledging. That complicated truth is enough." The boys, now 13, approached in matching suits that couldn't disguise their distinct personalities. Tyler, already showing the charismatic leadership that would someday guide Blake Investments into a new era. Mason, whose scientific brilliance had been recognized with a prestigious Young Researcher Award, and Ethan, whose artistic talents had transformed the foundation building's main hall with a breathtaking mural depicting diverse family structures. "They're ready for you, Dad," Tyler announced, naturally assuming the role of coordinator. "Gregory's here," Mason added cautiously. "3rd row, right side." "I still think he should have gone to prison longer," Ethan muttered, his artistic sensitivity making him the most emotionally protective of the family. Harrison placed a hand on Ethan's shoulder. "Justice took its course. Today isn't about him, it's about what we've built together." The family made their way to the stage, greeted by thunderous applause. In the front row sat Eleanor, Richard, Mrs. Chambers, and the extended family they had gathered over the years. Medical professionals who had treated Harrison sat alongside beneficiaries of the foundation's work, children who had found families through their adoption support programs, and young parents who had received ethical fertility treatments. Harrison approached the podium, his family flanking him in a united front that spoke volumes about their journey. 5 years ago, he began, his voice strong and clear, "a chance visit to an orphanage changed my life forever. 3 remarkable boys claimed me as their father before I even knew they were mine." His gaze swept across the audience, finding familiar faces. Dr. Kapoor, who had guided his treatment, Mrs. Winters from Brightwood Home, colleagues who had watched his transformation from cold financial titan to devoted family man. What none of us knew then was that an extraordinary truth lay beneath that seemingly random encounter. Through a series of events, some born of deception, others of pure chance, I discovered that the sons I had chosen to adopt were, in fact, biologically mine. Harrison paused, his eyes briefly meeting Gregory's in the audience. His cousin sat, rigidly, aged beyond his years by his imprisonment. Some might call such a reunion coincidence. Others might call it divine intervention. Harrison turned slightly toward his family, his voice softening. "I prefer to think of it as the power of connection, an invisible thread that binds us to those we're meant to find no matter what obstacles lie between." He continued, outlining the Foundation's 3 missions: ethical oversight in reproductive medicine, support for children in the adoption system, and research into cellular therapies that had saved his own life. The Blake legacy was nearly destroyed by greed and deception, Harrison acknowledged, but it has been reborn through love and truth. Today we dedicate this center not just to my sons who saved my life, but to every child seeking family, every parent longing for connection, and every person fighting for a second chance. As the ceremony concluded, with the cutting of a blue ribbon, Harrison felt Olivia's hand slip into his, their daughter balanced on her hip. The boys crowded close, their presence a constant reminder of how completely his life had transformed. In the reception that followed, Gregory approached hesitantly. Years of imprisonment had diminished his once imposing presence. "Harrison," he said quietly, "thank you for the invitation. The foundation. It's remarkable work." "It is," Harrison agreed, neither warm nor cold. "The boys," Gregory gestured toward where the triplets were charming benefactors. "They've grown. They have your spirit. They have their own spirits," Harrison corrected gently. "I'm just fortunate to guide them." An uncomfortable silence stretched between the cousins. Too much history for easy reconciliation, too much family connection for complete estrangement. "Second chances are possible, Gregory," Harrison said finally. "That's the whole point of today." Later, as sunset painted the Boston skyline in gold, the Blake family gathered on their penthouse terrace. Rebecca toddled between her brothers, who had appointed themselves her devoted protectors. Olivia leaned against Harrison's shoulder, both watching their children with quiet wonder. "Did you ever imagine this?" she asked softly. "That day at Brightwood when 3 little boys called you Daddy?" Harrison shook his head. "Never. I thought I was complete with my towers and bank accounts. I had no idea what I was missing." The invisible thread that had drawn him to his children, first to his heart and then to the truth of their connection, had completed its work, weaving separate lives into a tapestry of belonging that neither time nor deception could unravel. Harrison, Blake, once defined solely by wealth and power, had discovered the true meaning of riches in the most unexpected way. And as his family gathered around him in the fading light, he knew with absolute certainty that no empire, no fortune, no achievement could ever compare to the miracle of family, a miracle that had been waiting for him all along.